Brandon Krisztal from KOA and, of course, Guerilla Sports here with Vinny Benedetto, longtime Nuggets beat reporter for the Gazette. And I saw you last night during the game and then after the game. And anybody that was in that arena, and I think anyone watching, including Minnesota fans, Vinny, were shocked by what we saw. So before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of everything and where the series sits and what's going to come next, because you were on the other side of the arena from where I was sitting, you with the regular beat writers, and I was just right across from you, but not near you. What was the atmosphere like specifically amongst the other reporters that were over there, and then just from your vantage point as the game was unfolding?
Yeah, I'd say there's a good amount of disbelief going on. You know, just going into the game, you're thinking, hey, Minnesota got game one. They've got to be content with coming to Denver, getting one out of two. No Rudy Gobert. So it just felt like everybody was kind of thinking this was going to be the opportunity for the Nuggets to head to Minnesota 1-1 and you know, start feeling a little bit better about themselves. And it just went the complete opposite way. Not from the jump, but from late first quarter into early second quarter. I think there was that 15-0 run where Minnesota just kind of bullied the Nuggets into submission, it felt like.
And looking specifically at some of the things that either you could say Minnesota was doing or the Nuggets were doing as a result of what Minnesota was causing them to do. But there were a couple of times where, and I asked, that seemed to be kind of my line of questioning post-game about, at least to Michael Malone and to Joker, about being rushed. Because there's a time where Joker's got somebody smaller on him, I can't remember, maybe Mike Conley even, and MPJ just throws a lazy pass, and it's behind him, right? And that happened several times where I understand that Minnesota's going to pick you up full court a lot just to make you work a little harder. Not because they're really looking for a steal there. Most times in the NBA, it's not like a college press where a really athletic team might be able to take the ball away from a team that doesn't have good ball handlers. This is the NBA. No one turns the ball over in the backcourt almost ever unless something fluky happens. But it does just make you have to deal with precise dribbling and not getting into your offense maybe as easily as you'd like. So they weren't going to take anything away from Minnesota, but how much of the Nuggets' I mentioned poor passing to Michael Malone, he also said poor dribbling, how much of that was a byproduct of what Minnesota was doing, and how much of it was the Nuggets kind of playing into their hands and making it easier for them?
Yeah, I think it started with what Minnesota was doing, and like with that picking up in the backcourt, it also is just taking a few seconds off the shot clock. And it felt like there were so many times last night where the Nuggets look at the shot clock and there's 5-6 seconds left and they're not running anything, and they've got to figure out what to do real quickly. And then later in the game, it just felt like the frustration with the physicality and the way the game was called had kind of corrupted Denver's offensive philosophy, and it just felt like there was one point Jamal Murray threw a behind the back pass into traffic that got picked off. Aaron Gordon tried to throw a between the legs pass to Michael Jordan to Michael Porter that ends up going out of bounds. So I think it starts with what Minnesota was doing, heating up the ball, pressuring Jamal Murray almost the length of the court, and then it felt like frustration kind of took over, and the Nuggets just ended up way out of sync.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see in real time, and I don't know what the answer is, but I guess I'll kind of ask two questions around the same topic. But how surprised are you that we knew what Michael Malone was going to say Saturday, although that was a pretty quick post-game, but then Sunday when he said, I'll know early, one, whether we have the sense of urgency and if we're going to match their physicality and intensity. So knowing that that was what he was expecting, I guess, why do you think they still weren't able to match Minnesota's intensity and physicality?
Yeah, it feels like health is playing some part of this with the starting backcourt. Like Jamal Murray is not the Jamal Murray people around here are used to seeing, and I feel like that has kind of just changed a lot of the way the Nuggets are operating offensively and maybe impacted their confidence because, you know, you think back to last season and it was just, you know, the Jamal Joker two-man game. As long as it's close in the fourth quarter, they can just run that almost to perfection and produce offense at a pretty high rate. And it just doesn't feel like anything is coming easily right now. So I think there's some maybe lack of belief after two games, just knowing that they don't have the Jamal Murray they've been accustomed to having in previous playoff runs. This Minnesota team is a tough matchup, even with a completely healthy Jamal Murray. And then, you know, Anthony Edwards is a guy who can kind of break your spirit, and I think we might have seen some of that as well, because I think, like we've talked about previously, just feels like Anthony Edwards occupies this space between Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Aaron Gordon, where the Nuggets just don't have a really solid matchup option there defensively for him.
Well, even when he would get doubled or there'd be help coming, I remember the play on the baseline when they're in front of their own bench and Michael Porter Jr. is coming over. Now, maybe he could have gotten a little more extended, could have gotten his hand up to really affect the shot, but it's in Ant's face, no problem at all. Fade away. I know he was quick to dismiss the Michael Jordan comparisons, but Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron, anybody that's got that baseline fade away, we saw LeBron hit it plenty certainly in his career, but definitely in that first round series. Ant, it seemed to be no problem because he definitely had somebody smaller on him, and you think, okay, well, Porter's 6'10", here he comes, and he just didn't get there enough to really even affect that line of sight at all. And I understand good shooters, good offense can still be good defense. Just look at what Jamal did over Anthony Davis in that first game winner. I guess to play off sort of where that is with the intensity and all of that, do you think the Nuggets going into an extremely hostile environment, because they haven't had a second-round home playoff series there in 2 decades, right? When KG was in his prime before he goes to Boston. What leads you to believe, Jamal's health notwithstanding, that the rest of the team will bring it? Because Reggie Jackson over and over kept saying, we got punked, we got punked. He said, he talked for 2 minutes and 10 seconds and must have said, we got punked a dozen times. How do they not only prevent from getting punked, but match that intensity? Or do you think that there's a real likelihood that they won't in Game 3?
Yeah, having been around the team for a few years, it feels like close to 90% of the time, like after a frustrating loss, the team has been able to regroup and come out and play really well the next game. I probably would have said that after Game 1.
Of course.
And then we show up in Game 2, and it's not the case. So it's really I'm kind of 50-50 on whether or not the Nuggets show up with the requisite intensity in Game 3. Obviously, there's pride involved here, and all these guys are super competitive guys. So I think they're not going to just go to Minnesota and lay down. But if the playoff trend continues of the Nuggets getting off to a slow start in Game 3, like I've been to games in Minnesota before, that place gets loud. They are hungry for,
it's like a pack of wolves.
Like a pack of wolves. They're really eager to see, a contending team in Minnesota. So it's not going to be easy, but I would expect that they at least show up and give it a fight early.
One of the bigger storylines, obviously, throughout the day, and then as we got closer to the game, it's funny when you ask a question and it gets the whole premise gets shot down within minutes. But I was curious with the reports and talking. It was literally 3 Minnesota reporters. Like, it looks like Rudy's going to land about 10 after 7. So clearly, I don't think those guys were reporting that he was getting on a plane, if there wasn't a plane at least available and booked to come to Denver. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, that's total misdirection that makes no sense. And so I asked Michael Malone, if Rudy gets here and the game started, do visiting players get to use your practice gym? Because not every arena has a practice court available to their own players, let alone visiting players. And I feel like over the years I've heard when superstars haven't wanted to come out pregame, Kobe, maybe LeBron at certain times, guys like that, the Nuggets have let them just warm up in that, because they're going to warm up somewhere. So it's not like it's taking away from anyone's warm-up. And Malone answered that question. Then I said, well, what happens if they don't have Rudy Gobert? It's a 2-part question. He goes, I'll answer the second one first. I have no idea. And that may really be true, because there may not have been an instance where it's mattered. It's maybe never even come to him. Maybe it was something Tim Conley was aware of, or somebody else on his staff over the years, or before him, Masai, or before him, the 3-headed monster GM situation that they had with Warkentine and Rex and the late Brett Barrett as well. I don't really know all of that. Or Josh Kroenke was. Regardless, it never came to pass, because within minutes, Chris Finch said he's not playing. Like, literally the first thing right out of the coach's mouth for the T-Wolves was no Rudy Gobert. So the Nuggets knew they weren't going to have to deal with Rudy's shot blocking, but it didn't seem to slow down the Minnesota defense. If anything, you could say they were more active, and maybe it's because they knew they didn't have their eraser back there.
Yeah, I don't know, but it felt like early the Nuggets were going to try to, put some pressure on that inside duo of Kyle Anderson and Karl Anthony Towns. I think they got Anderson switched onto Nikola Jokic on the first possession, and he throws it back to Aaron Gordon, who got a dunk. But they weren't able to, sustainably or continue to exploit that. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the perimeter defensive. I mean, Jaden McDaniels was all over the place. Nickeil Alexander Walker.
Suffocating, really.
Yeah, they're just hounding guys on the perimeter. And, I think if there's one direction the Nuggets should have gone last night, I think they just needed to get the ball to Nikola Jokic repeatedly and needed him to be aggressive with it, looking to score or looking to draw fouls, and it just wasn't able to – it just didn't happen.
The one thing I noticed, and I haven't gone back and watched the game yet, and I might before Game 3, but when they did get the ball to Nikola and it wasn't a bad pass, there is a lot of activity around him,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more so than when Rudy's there, because Jamal Murray's shooting the ball so poorly, and we'll get to that. KCP, he's dealing with leg stuff. Aaron Gordon, can certainly knock down an open three from time to time, but really Michael Porter is the only one that's going to scare the other team that you just can't leave him open, right? And then Justin Holiday came in and hit those 4 threes. But there was more activity around Joker than there often is, and especially activity maybe by smaller guys, right? I think that disrupted their offensive timing as much as anything. And so I'm not exactly sure how Michael Malone and his coaching staff attacked that, but if anyone can figure out how to attack a defense and what's going on around them, Nikola Jokic is always going to be the guy that has the answers to the test.
Yep, and it'll be interesting to see how Game 3 starts, just because in Game 1, Minnesota was very comfortable just throwing Rudy Gobert at Joker and playing that matchup pretty much one-on-one, which then obviously allows the other 4 defenders to stay closer to their men, try to take away Michael Porter Jr.'s space or whoever on the perimeter. Then Game 2, it felt like they obviously needed to bring more help, and there should have been more available, kick-out options to shooters. And, it just doesn't feel like the Nuggets created really many quality three-point looks. There were a handful, obviously, that they missed, but it's not like this is the Lakers series where they were just kicking out to open shooters who weren't making shots.
Right.
It just felt like everything the Nuggets did last night was in a crowd, and there were long arms everywhere, and just
active. There was an intensity.
Yeah,
it was really impressive to see.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the arena, but at halftime I was curious what Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith and Shaq would say, so I flipped on their halftime show, and Chuck said it was one of the most impressive defensive performances he had ever seen. And I know sometimes it's hard to rank things or put them into historical context, but when you're talking about the defending champs at home, down 30 at halftime, without perhaps the best defensive player in the league, certainly the best defensive player statistically on their team, it was perplexing, I think, in a lot of ways. And if you're not a Nuggets fan, you're probably saying, wow, that was one of the craziest things ever, which is, exactly what Charles Barkley said. He's not a Nuggets fan, neither here nor there. I think he likes the way Joker plays. That's been established. But it was, I guess, awesome is kind of the right word, because of how surprising it was.
It was amazing.
Just basketball,
at it,
just as a basketball fan, not as a fan of the Nuggets. If you're a Nuggets fan, I get it. You're bummed. You should be.
Yep. But, I mean, that Nuggets offense, we've seen put up 40 points in a quarter, and the Timberwolves held them to 35 in the first half without their rim protector.
Without the rim protector, and, I tweeted at 42-20, Anthony Edwards had 4 of those 42 points, so they had gotten 38 points of their 42 from guys not named Anthony Edwards. Now, he and Cat obviously finished with 27 each, but I almost wonder, though, if they change they're not going to be less intense, but just sort of the way you operate when you don't have that rim protector that's going to be literally the human eraser. The other side of it, though, and I asked Joker about this, when you don't, and this actually came from Shelby Harris, who, of course, is a big part of what we do here at Guerilla, but I saw Shelby at halftime also, and he's like, with no Rudy, and it's not like he plays all 48 minutes.
Right.
But for the entire game, you've got scores, right? Or better offensive basketball players. Mm-hmm. Kyle Anderson being, at the forefront, Naz Reid getting a little more run. I guess I don't know where his minutes actually finished up. But that allows you to just run offense more easily than having to factor Rudy in and have him take up space.
Yeah, because when Rudy and Karl Anthony Towns are out there, it like almost forces Karl Anthony Towns to be a perimeter player because the spacing would get so wonky if he's trying to post up on Aaron Gordon while Rudy Gobert is
kind of nearby,
right,
with his man.
It'd make for easy double teams or. So yeah, it's just kind of hard to wrap your head around at times. Where this Nuggets team, like, if you would have told me going in the postseason the Nuggets are going to struggle with the Timberwolves, sure, obviously that makes sense. But I wouldn't have thought the offense would have been such the issue. With this team, it's just, if you would have told me Anthony Edwards is going to average 35, 38 points a game and the Nuggets just don't have an answer, like, yeah, that's pretty easy to buy into. But what they've done defensively is just kind of jaw-dropping.
It is, and so then it goes back to what you saw from, Joker, a near triple-double, but 16 points with no Gobert there is a bit surprising that it wasn't north of 30. I mean, scored 32 with Rudy. He averaged 34.5 against them in the 4 games, and the 1 game Rudy wasn't there, he scored 35. So in the 4 regular season games, he has 32 in game 1 to only get 16 points. He has 16 rebounds and 8 assists. We know the shots weren't falling consistently around him, and a lot of that is Jamal Murray. At 3 for 18, it was wild how many rebounds Jamal had, especially in the first quarter. Right? He had 8 or 10 or 11 rebounds in the first quarter, finished with 13 early in the first half. You're not going to see too many double-digit rebounding games from Jamal, certainly not 13 rebounds. Opposite is one thing if he gets a nice triple-double, but opposite of such a poor scoring night. So how do they handle – let's take this potential suspension. As we're taping this now, no word about a suspension, and there's maybe not even an apparatus in place to suspend him because a tech wasn't issued, and there's only so much they can do. They can probably fine him a reasonable amount. But let's say he plays. We don't know where Reggie is. He seemed to be optimistic post-game, watching him hobble off. I don't know how, but sometimes Hoopers sprain their ankles. How do they run their offense specifically with those 2 point guards, but mostly with Jamal, with him clearly, like you said off the top, not being the Jamal we're used to seeing?
Yeah, it just feels like it's going to take a lot of screens to try and free up Jamal a bit more. And not just screens, but like solid screens. Like there's going to have to be significant contact between the screener and Jaden McDaniels or whoever it is, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, whoever's hounding Jamal Murray the length of the court. They've got to do a little bit better job of getting those defenders off Jamal Murray and getting him a little bit of space. Because, and you mentioned the rebounding, and one thing I think that's interesting about his rebounding totals last night is, like, to me that indicates that he's engaged and, like, the effort is there. But just the offensive production hasn't. And so, with the calf injury, I think he's just not getting the easy buckets that we've, seen him drive for layups. I mean, he almost had one last night, but lost the ball on the way up for a dunk attempt, and it just, kind of that kind of night for Jamal and the team as a whole. But they've just got to find a way to make it easier on him. And, you mentioned the 3 for 18. I think some of that were, at least a few of those shots were him trying to bait a foul call that didn't come, and it ended up being just a bad shot attempt. So they've got to find a way to get some of those defenders off of Jamal, make it a little bit easier for him to get clean looks, because there just hasn't been enough of those for him through 2 games.
All right, so I looked this up on my phone because I wanted to see that I got it right. But teams that start 0-2 at home in a best-of-7 series historically are 4-22 to win a series. So it has happened. We know the 0-3 stat is up to probably at least 153-0 now with the Nuggets and the T-Wolves winning their opening round series, T-Wolves with the sweep, and then maybe 1 or 2 more there that I'm missing. But I just didn't track the first round beyond those 2. But 4-22 means it's happened, not a lot. And, I was in the locker room, asked Aaron Gordon, how confident are you that this group can bring it, right? Can get out of this funk, can come out in game 3 Friday night. And he basically says, I know we can, and that's all we're focused on is game 3. We can't worry about the series, coming back, all of that. But he said if we can win game 3, then momentum swings in our favor. And so knowing that history isn't on their side, but at least it's happened, if you wanted to give Nuggets fans any encouragement, can you, that they could be the 5th team ever to do this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the core of this team has also come back down from 3-1 twice in the same postseason. And I think, obviously different Aaron Gordon wasn't on the team then. It all looks slightly different. Maybe this is a better opponent than the two teams they came back 3-1 from. But this team has dealt with adversity before in the postseason, specifically Jamal and Joker, and have found ways to overcome it. So it's not going to be easy, but last postseason they managed to win a road game in all 4 series, and they've been a pretty solid road team throughout. So I think, Michael Malone said not even worried about Game 3. He's thinking about the first quarter of Game 3 and then where it goes from there. So I think if they can get off to a strong start, get some confidence going that way, I think they certainly have the makeup and the ability to win a game on the road. And then I think back to the first round series against the Lakers. Nuggets go up 3-0. Lakers win Game 4 to extend the series. That's when Jamal originally tweaked his calf. And so then there was doubt or questions if Jamal plays Game 5. And I just remember seeing people kind of build up the momentum for the Lakers to make it a series at that point. So so many different things can happen in Game 3 that would open up the opportunities for the Nuggets to get this done. And I'm not saying, you should be rooting for an injury on the Timberwolves to make it happen. But, one hot shooting game that, we've seen this team shoot north of 50% from 3. So if they have a game where they hit 18 to 23s, it's just going to be hard for Minnesota to keep up with that. And you look at the Timberwolves' point totals in games 1 and 2, they scored 106 in each of the first 2 games. For this Nuggets team, if you hold the opponent to 106 points, you should be in the game in the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter and have a chance to win. And this is a team who's been historically good in the clutch. So I think if they can get off to a solid first quarter, just get some momentum, make the Timberwolves realize that the Nuggets are not going to lay down here and put up a fight. I think there's certainly a route to win Game 3, and then you go into Game 4 knowing that you've won here before. So yeah, I think it's certainly doable given this team's history, but it's certainly not going to be easy.
No, it won't. But you'll be there. I'll be there. The Gazette, Guerilla will have it covered. Make sure you're following Vinny. Make sure you're following me, and make sure you're following us for all of your great Nuggets content, because their backs are squarely against the wall. We'll see how they come out in Game 3 Friday in Minnesota, and then Vinny and I will catch up Saturday too to kind of recap where things are and preview Game 4.